We're getting to the point where we're doing the finish work on a couple of these chisels, and now we have to make this socket portion right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of black iron, 3/4 inch black iron pipe, schedule 40. It's about an 1/8 inch wall thickness. We're going to heat it up. We're going to put it on a bick that I made for the anvil. We're going to pound it out into this cone shape, then we'll clean it up on the grinder. So I can't turn these handles. Now this is an ash handle that I blackened out with a torch, and then we put spar urethane on it. This is the same 3/4 inch schedule schedule 40 black iron pipe as this right here, but you can see the difference in the diameter here. It's a little bit wider, but that's just from pounding it out on the bick and getting that shape we want. So what we'll do with this, like I said, we'll get this cut, we'll get this pounded out, we'll polish it up, and then we can get some measurements on the inside of it. Then we can start turning our handles for these chisels. Well, it's time for the part that drives me nuts because sometimes I tend to get crooked on my handles, but here's what we have. So this is a piece of ash out of the firewood pile that's nice and dry. It's been cut for probably 4 or 5 years, so I know it's nice and dry. We have our maker's mark on there, kind of hard to see in this light on the camera, but it's in there. We burned that in with the laser. That's the Ortur Laser Master 2 Pro. Now it's advertised, I think, as a 20-watt diode. Don't quote me on that. You have to do your own information. But honestly, it does a fantastic job. This maker's mark, I did get a close-up earlier. Let's see, focus, you bastard. There we go. It's actually a pretty detailed maker's mark. And when it's that small, you can see every tooth of the saw blade. I'm really impressed with this. We'll do a different maker's mark for the knives. It'll probably just be a name, words on there. I don't know quite if we want to put a big logo on those, but for the tools, it's kind of nice. Get a little more ornate with it. So what we do is I'm going to cut a piece of leather out. We're going to drill it and we're going to slide it over the tang. That's going to be our cushion between this piece right here and the socket on the handle of the chisel. That'll help absorb some of the impact into the chisel handle. Now we have our ferrule on the end here. I will epoxy this on to start, but what happens with these over time as you use it, this part right here actually mushrooms out a little bit, and that becomes kind of a pressure fit on there. Sometimes I tend to get a little too crazy with the lathe, but it doesn't hurt anything. Like I said, it's epoxied on, and then you get that nice pressure fit. Now I'm finding that if I put a nice rounded shoulder right there, this ferrule here does not drive into the handle so much. It's ash. It's super tough stuff. If you guys watch the timber frame vlog, you'll notice that my firewood mallet was made out of ash, and I used it for, 2 years before it started breaking, and that was pounding the shit out of it all the time. So let's get to this. We'll drill this out first, then we're going to cut the piece out, cram it on here, and then we're going to cram this on this tang and hope we drive it on straight. It doesn't really matter what side you put up or down on this. So the nice square edges on these tangs, it does a good job working itself on there. And what'll happen, so this tang into the handle is a pressure fit, which works out nice. It shouldn't go anywhere. But we'll cut this off and, well, we have a jackknife right here, I think. Now, the handy dandy Leatherman. Where would I be without it? My apprentices at work get really tired of hearing about the old Leatherman. But it works for me. Now, I leave this obviously bigger than it needs to be. And that's simply because I will take it to the 2x72 and we're going to blend everything in together nice with the Scotch-Brite belts. And I'll use an old one because the leather does tend to clog it up a little bit. But this is actually cowhide, so it's nice and thick. Now when you drive it on there, you have a little bump right there. Not a bad idea to carve that off. It's just less you're going to have to compress against the where the chisel meets the chisel handle and that tang connection there. And you don't have to go nuts with it, but it does help a little bit. I'd like to do it like this because I can get over top of it and I can kind of guide this handle down nice and straight, just eyeballing it down. And at this juncture, if it gets off on you a little bit, you can correct it. There we go. Let's just screw it all up. You can kind of watch it. Kind of going on there a little crooked. So I'll try to correct. There we go, that's not too bad. You're going to notice this whole thing right here tightens up very nicely as you go. I want to keep sighting down. Boy, that's going on nicer than most of them have yet. And I'm kind of on a knot here, and I do that on purpose because it usually doesn't split out on me. Almost there. That last little bit's always a bastard because you're compressing all this wood into this into the socket. And I just go to where the leather makes a nice tight fit. And we are just about there. I said we're just about there. And probably my favorite part is putting the spar urethane on. Gives that burnt handle just such a nice look. First coat pretty well soaks into the wood. I'll let it tack up for a little bit. Then we'll put a proper coat on it. Big thing is I just don't want it running. I don't want any drips. I don't want to have to sit here and hand sand it all off. Now, I'm not above the use of epoxy. I think it's somebody's gift to man. But for these ferrule connections, like I said, as you use this chisel and this top here mushrooms out a little bit, it actually tightens it in there pretty well. This just kind of gives insurance for the user until that happens, because believe it or not, this ash is pretty stout. It takes impact extremely well. And I do, of course, tend to get it everywhere, but that's because I'm an idiot. Well, it's that time again, folks, where I sit down like a lazy steaming pile in the old piece of shit plastic rocking chair and contemplate the evening. We don't do this as much as we used to because I've tried to cut back on the talking in the videos because I think for some people it gets a little ponderous to watch, but I know for the regulars, you guys like to have a conversation. So where I'm at after, after this past weekend and all the fiascos, we're kind of getting back on track. So that chisel that we were working on tonight is almost ready to go. I just have to put a final edge on it, a couple more coats of the spar urethane. I like spar urethane. It seems to be quite tough, quite resilient. Now we did epoxy the ferrule on the striking end of the chisel. I know that might sound a little cheesy, but it just kind of helps hold all that in place until that wood starts mushrooming out a little bit and you get a nice tight pressure fit on that. I fully expect the striking end of my chisels to get a little beat up. So that's why we leave so much wood sticking out past the ferrule there. Now the sockets, they're a little time consuming to make, and I really should make some tools for the hardy hole to make that a little bit easier. And we may explore that as we go. Actually, the guillotine tool I made would probably do nicely for that, at least to get those started. And then the bick on the anvil, we'll have to try that the next time out, because that is the hard part, getting that, the narrow end. The wider end of the ferrules or the sockets, really easy to make. Now the other mistake that I have been making here and there while making these chisels is making the tangs just way too thick. I don't need them that thick. I always worry about strength, because I've seen plenty of people try to use your chisels as pry bars when they're working the wood out of there. It's really not what they're intended for, but it does happen. I've caught myself doing it. So I want to make sure everything's nice and stout there, because last thing I want is somebody using that chisel and having that tang snap off of there. So we also, I only harden a couple inches on the end of the chisels, and then I temper them back to a good straw, even a little bit darker than straw color. I don't want that cutting edge so brittle that when you hit a good knot in the wood that it chips out, but we don't want it so soft that the edge rolls. It's kind of a happy medium to keep there. Now eventually I could see a heat treating oven in this shop, and we probably should add one, especially with the amount of knives we're making now, the steels we're using now. The steel that I use for the chisels and the tools like that is super forgiving on heat treats and normalizing. That's one reason I'd like to use it. It's just, and it's such a nice tough steel. 1080 is a fantastic steel in my opinion. There's always somebody's going to say there's better, and there's always better. But for me, with the tools that I have and the processes that I use, that 1080 is absolutely beautiful to work with. It's a little tougher to forge out, but I've definitely forged out tougher. So we're going to be doing, I get this next chisel done, I can get those shipped out. I've got 3 of them on the bench to ship out. I've got to get that draw knife done, get that shipped out. And I have more stuff coming in, but I'm trying to work it, as I've said before, not so much doing the custom orders, but get some tools made, get it on the website. Now for you regulars like Don out there, and I think you're what are you in Wyoming, Don? He would like a 3-inch slick, and we'll be getting to work on that in the future after I get a few of these knife orders done. I'm probably going to try to make, I won't make any promises because you guys know how that goes. I will try to make 4 or 5 of those slicks to get them on the website, but I want to make sure I get Don's to him first. He has been a loyal viewer here of this channel since pretty much day one, and I want to make sure he has a tool that he really likes. Now, when I make the timber framing slicks, I haven't showed you guys on camera yet, but those suckers are almost 3 feet long by the time I'm done with them. I put a nice walnut handle on them because you're not prying, you're not hammering against it. It just looks really sharp. As far as my framing chisels go, the firmer chisels, I love the white ash for those handles. It's a nice interlocking grain. It's tougher than hell. You can beat on it all day. Now, if I have to rehandle some of these in the future, we will find out. I've tested them myself, torture tested. You guys, I had a video out a while ago where I actually used a small sledgehammer and beat the crap out of it to failure, and even then it was not a total failure. And honestly, I don't think anybody's ever going to be hitting the striking end of these chisels nearly as hard as I did in that test, and it withstood a lot before that ferrule started driving down into the rest of the handle. But like I said, it was still completely usable. It definitely was not it was more of a looks thing at that point. It looked hideous afterwards, but it was still very much usable. And if you guys remember that video, I beat the snot out of that thing. I hit that thing like it owed me money. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this one, guys. I'm trying to get more content out from the shop, from the forge, so you guys can see what's going on. And this is the time of year that we can really get back into it. All the major work's done around the farm for the summer. My job starts slowing down a little bit, not as much as you'd think, but enough to where I can actually get home at a reasonable time to get out here in the shop and work. And the weekends, of course, are much less taken up. And another thing, speaking of weekends, Columbus Day weekend in East Durham, New York is one of the most awesome events in human history. It is my favorite place to go, and I'm not just saying that, it is my favorite place to go. It is called the Catskills Mountains Makers Camp, and it is at the Blackthorn Resort from October 5th, I believe, to, I want to say, the 9th. So it's Columbus Day weekend. They still have silver passes for sale. I think it's $242. Don't quote me. You'd have to check. Maybe $252 for the silver pass tickets. And what that does is it gets you total access for the entire weekend, and it gets you a free tent campsite to where you can pitch a tent and hang out. It is the most fun that you can have with your pants on anywhere. It is awesome. You have blacksmithing, you have CNC tables going. This year there's going to be glass blowing, stone cutting, making bloom steel the way that our ancestors did. There is, we do a timber frame down there. So Justin Dietrich out of Illinois, myself and Chip Platt this summer taught the timber framing class at the Blackthorn Resort back in July. So what we did is we had a lot of people there, and Justin and I and Chip, we taught the class, and we got an entire timber frame cut and ready to go up. So we will be standing that up at Makers Camp this year. We do one every year. You have the welding tents. You have Broadbeck Ironworks is going to be there. Jay Nielsen, a judge from Forged and Fire, is going to be there. It is a incredible time. Jimmy DiResta, that's kind of his where he hangs his hat these days. He usually shows up, makes a few appearances, and he's a super nice guy when you meet him in person. But there's so many awesome people there. I can't even begin to describe how cool it is to go there. You have some of the most talented knife makers, woodworkers, carvers, anything you can imagine show up for this event. A lot of the people you watch on Instagram or YouTube, you get a lot of them that end up showing up. So if you go to the Blackthorn Resort website or Catskills Makers Camp website, just Google it, it should pop up. You can get your tickets for there. And I tell you what, if you're anywhere in the Northeast and you're able to swing it, man, you cannot go wrong. It is one of the most fun times you will ever have. And it's so laid back. It's so nice. Austin, the guy who runs the event, and his family own the resort, and they are just fantastic people. They're so supportive of the maker community and blacksmiths. It's just awesome. I can't say enough good about it. I'll try to run the camera there this year. I won't promise you anything because, to be honest with you, I'm having so much fun just hanging out, doing the timber frame and all that I don't run the camera a ton. I did the first time I went, but I don't know. It's just awesome. So anyway, have a good night, everybody, and I will catch you on the next one.